The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of paper sliding against paper. Not dramatic, not loud, just deliberate, like someone was taking their time sharpening a blade. Jessica Park sat at the plaintiff's table with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were the color of old chalk. 31 years old, corporate attorney turned whistleblower, the kind of woman who used to speak in polished sentences and never show fear. Now she kept her eyes on the tabletop because she'd learned something about rooms like this. If you look too long at the people who want you gone, they start to feel entitled to your collapse. Her suit was navy blue, professional, off the rack. It didn't whisper status. It didn't sparkle. It didn't tell anyone she belonged. And that was the point, because she didn't belong anymore. Marcus Reed, her lawyer, sat beside her with the calm of someone who had spent years watching powerful institutions lie without blinking. Civil rights attorney, corporate predator hunter, the kind of man who spoke in court the way other men prayed, slowly, like every word mattered. He reviewed his notes as if this were a normal morning. Jessica couldn't make her breathing normal. Across the aisle sat Thomas Caldwell, 63, Vertex Pharmaceuticals CEO, a man who wore authority like a second skin, silver hair, a suit that probably cost more than Jessica's last car, a face that smiled on the covers of Fortune and Bloomberg Businessweek, a man who built a $12 billion company, a man who told her, on a recording, that he approved a cancer drug knowing people would die, because it was profitable. 7 lawyers filled the defense table like an honor guard, white shoe firms, perfect posture, eyes trained to look through her, not at her, sharks with polite expressions. The gallery was packed. Reporters lined the back row, their pens ready, their phones charged. This was national news now: pharmaceutical corruption, corporate greed, whistleblower retaliation, a story the public loved because it made evil simple. Jessica didn't feel like a symbol. She felt like the one person in the room who could still hear the dead. Judge Harold Mitchell entered from the side door. 70 years old, white hair, a face carved from granite and pressure. 32 years on the bench, known for 2 things: patience and the way it ended. All rise. The courtroom stood. Judge Mitchell sat. The courtroom sat. He opened the file in front of him. It was massive, hundreds of pages, depositions, expert testimony, internal emails, financial projections, and 1 audio recording. Judge Mitchell looked at Jessica, then at Thomas Caldwell. This is Park v. Vertex Pharmaceuticals, a wrongful termination and whistleblower retaliation case. He paused. Ms. Park alleges Vertex knowingly released Zeltrex, a cancer medication, despite internal data showing severe and fatal side effects. A murmur moved through the courtroom like a wind. He continued. She also alleges that CEO Thomas Caldwell personally authorized this release, and that she has audio evidence of Mr. Caldwell acknowledging that decision. Judge Mitchell looked to Marcus. Mr. Reed, is the recording your primary evidence? Marcus stood. Yes, Your Honor, along with internal documents, emails, and witness testimony. Judge Mitchell turned to the defense. Catherine Voss stood, 55, immaculate, sharp in a way that made cruelty feel like professionalism. You contest the authenticity? Yes, Your Honor, we allege the audio was fabricated, edited, and taken out of context. Judge Mitchell's gaze did not soften. Fabricated is a serious allegation, Ms. Voss. We have forensic evidence, Your Honor. We'll hear it. Judge Mitchell leaned forward slightly. Before we proceed, I want the timeline. When did Ms. Park make the recording? March 18th, 2 years ago, during an executive meeting. And when did she report it? The next day, Your Honor, to compliance. She was fired 3 days later. Judge Mitchell looked at Catherine. Your client fired her 3 days after she reported the alleged misconduct? Catherine's tone was smooth. She was terminated for violating confidentiality policies. The timing is coincidental. Coincidental. The word hung like smoke. Judge Mitchell closed the file, but he didn't set it down. He held it, like it weighed more than paper. Let me be clear, he said. If these allegations are true, this is not simply retaliation. This is potential mass harm, criminal exposure. He looked at Thomas Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell, do you understand the gravity of these proceedings? Thomas stood, voice polished. Yes, Your Honor, and for the record, Vertex follows every regulation. We would never knowingly harm patients. Judge Mitchell's eyes didn't change. We'll see. Catherine Voss lifted a hand. Your Honor, before openings, the defense moves to exclude the audio recording as evidence. The courtroom shifted. Reporters leaned forward. Judge Mitchell tapped his gavel once, not loud, just enough. On what grounds? Catherine didn't hesitate. Illegal recording, a private conversation captured without consent. Jessica felt her throat go tight. The floor didn't drop, it thinned. Marcus stood fast. Your Honor, this was a workplace meeting about compliance and patient safety. We'll hear argument, Judge Mitchell said, but Miss Voss, you're saying the recording is illegal? Yes, Your Honor, and inadmissible. Judge Mitchell leaned back, looked at Jessica, then at the file. I'll take it under advisement. Jessica's heart began to pound so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. If the recording died here, everything died with it, and Vertex would call it justice. Before we go any further, let's keep one thing clear, quietly, the way truth usually has to live in powerful rooms. This is a fictional dramatization, not a real case, not real people, not legal advice. But the story it tells is familiar. A corporation with money, a person with conscience, and the moment the system tries to decide which one matters more. If you've ever wondered what it costs to speak up, if you've ever watched people protect a lie because the truth was expensive, then stay with this. Like the video, subscribe to One Verdict Away, and tell me where you're watching from. Home, work break, or late at night when the world is quiet and stories hit harder. Now, let's go back. Back to March 18th. Back to the day Jessica Park heard the CEO admit something he thought no one would ever dare repeat. Jessica Park didn't join Vertex Pharmaceuticals to become a martyr. She joined because Vertex was the dream. At least, that's what the brochures said. Saving lives through innovation, breakthrough therapies, hope for the hopeless. Jessica believed that kind of language because she was the type of person who still believed words should mean something. Her first year in legal was boring, clean, predictable. Contracts, vendor agreements, regulatory checklists. The corporate world was a machine, and her job was to keep it running smoothly. She did it well, too well. By the end of year 2, she was senior counsel, trusted with compliance review, pulled into meetings where the CFO used phrases like risk tolerance and market positioning, and everyone nodded like it was prayer. Jessica's mentor inside Vertex was Daniel Torres, general counsel, charismatic, fatherly, the kind of executive who took younger staff under his wing. He called her kiddo sometimes. He told her she'd go far, and she did, until Zeltrex. Zeltrex was the crown jewel, a new drug aimed at stage 4 pancreatic cancer, one of the most unforgiving diagnoses on Earth. Vertex was positioning it as a miracle. Internally, people were already celebrating stock projections, revenue models, press strategies. But Jessica saw the trial report. 17 deaths. Not patients died. Deaths attributed directly to drug-induced organ failure. The report language was carefully softened. Phrases like complications, confounding factors, underlying fragility. Jessica didn't soften. She emailed Daniel. Subject line, Zeltrex mortality discrepancy, urgent. She attached excerpts, highlighted the numbers, asked if the FDA had seen the full breakdown. Daniel replied in under 10 minutes. We're aligned internally. Let's discuss Monday. Don't worry. Don't worry? Jessica didn't know then that don't worry wasn't reassurance. It was instruction. In the days before March 18th, she noticed other details, small things. A revised report version in the system with a different appendix, a redacted chart in the FDA submission packet, a compliance memo written in language so vague it could mean anything. She asked the chief medical officer, Dr. Raymond Lee, about it in passing. He didn't meet her eyes. Patients were terminal, he said quietly. This is how this works. How what works? She asked. He swallowed. Drug development. Then he walked away like someone fleeing guilt. Jessica told herself she was overreacting. Then came the executive meeting. March 18th, 2 p.m. Conference room, 40th floor. Glass walls, Manhattan stretched below like a promise. Thomas Caldwell sat at the head of the table like a man who never expected the world to refuse him. Around him were the people who actually ran Vertex: CFO, head of R&D, marketing VP, legal, medical, and Jessica. She came with her notebook, her questions, her discomfort tucked behind professionalism. The meeting began like any other. Marketing talked about messaging, miracle drug, breakthrough, a new chance. Thomas nodded like a priest hearing scripture. What about pricing? He asked. $180,000 per treatment cycle, marketing said. 6 cycles recommended. Someone chuckled in disbelief. That's over $1 million per patient. The CFO said calmly, insurance will cover much of it, and we'll have patient assistance programs. The headlines will be compassionate. The revenue will be real. Jessica wrote the numbers down and felt something twist in her stomach. Thomas asked, side effects? Dr. Lee cleared his throat. We'll disclose, but we'll frame them as rare and manageable. Jessica's eyes lifted. Rare? Silence. A pause too long. Dr. Lee said, adverse events in 34%. Jessica's voice came out quieter than she expected. 34% isn't rare. Dr. Lee's jaw tightened. For terminal patients, it's within acceptable parameters. That phrase again, acceptable. Jessica flipped her notes open. 17 trial deaths were drug-attributed, she said. Not cancer progression, drug toxicity. Thomas's eyes flicked toward her like a warning. Dr. Lee said those were categorized as complications. Jessica felt heat rise in her face, not anger, something else. Disbelief. That's not categorization, she said. That's concealment. The CFO leaned back, sighing like she'd interrupted a meeting about parking. Thomas's voice stayed calm. Miss Park, I appreciate your concern, but we're in the business of saving lives. Sometimes that means taking calculated risks. This isn't calculated, said Jessica. This is playing roulette with people who trusted us. Thomas's gaze sharpened. Have you ever sat with a stage 4 pancreatic cancer patient, Miss Park? Have you ever watched someone beg for 1 more month? Jessica didn't answer. Thomas continued, because the world you're defending, perfect safety, doesn't exist in oncology. Jessica's throat tightened. "That's not what I'm asking," she said. "I'm asking if the FDA has the full mortality data." Dr. Lee's face went pale. Thomas didn't look at Dr. Lee. He looked at Jessica. "The FDA has what it needs," Thomas said. Jessica's voice dropped. "Did they have the 17 deaths?" The room went still. Marketing stared at her like she'd become a problem they would soon remove. Daniel Torres cleared his throat softly. "Jessica," he murmured, "let's take this offline." That was betrayal, too. The mentor voice, the gentle warning, the request to be quiet. Jessica looked at him. Not angry, hurt. "Offline means hidden," she said. Thomas stood and walked to the window, staring at the city like it belonged to him. Then he turned back and said it, calmly, almost kindly, like explaining math to a child. "Here's the reality, Miss Park. Zeltrex is going to make this company $6 billion in the first year. Yes, some patients will die, but thousands more will live longer than they would have without it. That's the math." Jessica stared at him. "You're saying profit is worth more than lives?" Thomas didn't flinch. "I'm saying we're not shelving a billion-dollar drug because you're uncomfortable with risk." "Uncomfortable?" Jessica whispered. "You mean horrified." Thomas's eyes turned to ice. "Acceptable to who?" she asked. Thomas's voice was quiet. "To me." And no one challenged him. Not Daniel, not Dr. Lee, not the CFO. They just sat there. And that was when Jessica understood the real truth. Thomas Caldwell wasn't the only one making this decision. He was simply the only one willing to say it out loud. After the meeting, Jessica walked out with her face composed and her insides shaking. She reached her office, closed the door, and sat down as if her legs had stopped trusting her. Then she heard something faint, a soft click, from inside her bag. Her digital recorder. She froze. She had started recording meetings a month ago, not to trap anyone, not to build a case, just to keep notes. She'd been drowning in details. A recorder made her life easier. She had forgotten it was on. She pulled it out, pressed playback. Thomas's voice filled her office. "Some patients will die. 6 billion. That's the math." Jessica's stomach turned. She listened once, then again, because the human mind does a strange thing when it hears something unforgivable. It asks for repetition, like repetition might make it less real. That night Jessica didn't sleep. She transcribed every word, carefully, like she was writing a death certificate. At 5:42 a.m., she stared at her own notes and realized she'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She could either do nothing and live with it, or speak up and lose everything. At 8:17 a.m., she walked into compliance, not HR, compliance, because she still believed the system had a soul. A woman named Evelyn Shaw ran the department, known for being ethical, known for no nonsense. Evelyn offered a tight smile. "What can I do for you, Jessica?" Jessica didn't sit. "I need to report something," she said. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. "Go on." Jessica placed the recorder on the desk like it was fragile. "Thomas Caldwell approved Zeltrex knowing the mortality data. He admitted it." Evelyn's smile vanished. Jessica pressed play. Thomas's voice filled the office. Evelyn listened without interrupting. When it ended, she didn't speak for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Where did you get this?" "I recorded the executive meeting." Evelyn's face tightened, not with concern for patients, with concern for exposure. "You recorded without consent? It's evidence of—" Evelyn held up a hand. "Jessica, do you understand what you just handed me?" "A confession," Jessica said. Evelyn looked at her like she was naive. "No," Evelyn whispered, "a weapon, and you just placed it in the hands of people who know how to turn weapons around." Jessica's throat went dry. Evelyn stood, moved to the door, closed it, and lowered her voice. "Tell me something," she said. "Did Daniel Torres know you were coming here?" "No." Evelyn nodded slowly, then said something that cracked Jessica's spine with fear. "He will." Jessica blinked. Evelyn's voice softened, almost sad. "You think compliance exists to stop wrongdoing," she said. "Compliance exists to contain it." Jessica's eyes filled. "That's not what it's for." Evelyn looked away. "That's what it is." Then she reached for the recorder. "I'm going to need to keep this," she said. Jessica's hand hovered over it. "No," Jessica whispered. "I need a copy." Evelyn's eyes snapped back. "Jessica," she said, "if you want to survive this, you'll let me handle it." Handle it. The same words Thomas had used. Jessica felt cold. She left compliance with her chest tight, her heart pounding. By lunchtime, Daniel Torres asked her to step into his office. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten. He closed the door and smiled sadly. "Kiddo," he said, "what did you think you were doing?" Jessica's voice shook. "I did what the law requires." Daniel leaned back. "The law," he repeated, like it was cute. "No, you did what your conscience requires." His smile faded. "But conscience doesn't sign paychecks." Jessica stared at him. "You're part of it," she whispered. Daniel didn't deny it. He just said, "You have no idea how big this is." 3 days later, Jessica arrived at work and her badge didn't scan. Security approached politely. HR waited upstairs with papers already printed. Violation of confidentiality policy, unauthorized recording, breach of trust. No severance, no debate, just a box for her desk and an escort out like she was contagious. In the elevator down, Jessica watched her reflection and realized Vertex didn't just fire her. Vertex was rewriting her, turning her from senior counsel into disgruntled employee because that story was safer. On the sidewalk, holding a cardboard box, Jessica looked up at Vertex's glass tower and understood something she would never forget. It wasn't just Thomas Caldwell. It was everyone who stayed seated. And somewhere above her, behind glass and money, they were already planning the next betrayal. Jessica didn't become a whistleblower overnight. She became a ghost first. 2 weeks in her apartment, curtains drawn, phone face down, silence loud enough to feel like punishment. She applied for jobs, no calls. She reached out to former colleagues, no replies. Then she noticed something worse, a trade article about Zeltrex. It wasn't cautious, it was celebratory. Unprecedented survival benefit, breakthrough launch, and at the bottom, Thomas Caldwell quoted, smiling. Jessica felt sick because she knew the truth, and the truth was being polished into a press release. Her best friend Nicole finally dragged her outside. "You can't just disappear," Nicole said. Jessica laughed once, dry. "They already erased me." Nicole's eyes narrowed. "Then make them regret it." Jessica contacted law firms. 16 refused. Some were honest. "You're right, but you'll lose." Others weren't. "Insufficient evidence. Too risky. Recording may be inadmissible." The 17th was Marcus Reed. He listened to the recording once. Then he asked something no one else had asked. "Do you still have the original file?" Jessica hesitated. I think so." Marcus didn't smile. "Not think, no." Jessica swallowed. "I copied it to my laptop, backed it up, then..." After compliance kept my device for review, I got it back. Marcus went still. Compliance kept your device? Yes, for 2 hours. Marcus nodded slowly. That was the first time Jessica understood. They didn't just want her quiet, they wanted her evidence, and if they couldn't take it, they would poison it. Trial began Monday. Jury selection felt like being measured by strangers. Jessica watched prospective jurors look at her and then look at Caldwell, like they were trying to decide which person made sense. Caldwell looked like success. Jessica looked like fallout. Opening statements hit like opposing prayers. Marcus framed her as courage. Catherine framed her as bitterness. Then day 5 came. The recording played. Thomas Caldwell's voice filled the room again. But this time it wasn't just Jessica hearing it. It was 12 jurors, reporters, a judge, a room full of people who couldn't pretend they hadn't heard. And still, Vertex didn't panic. That's what chilled Jessica most. They expected this. They were prepared. Because the betrayal wasn't just lying, it was planning. Then their expert, Dr. Breslow, testified. Edits, splices, manipulation. Marcus's cross landed clean. The words weren't fabricated. They were real. But then Catherine played her real card. Discovery documents. Metadata. A story designed to make the jury look at Jessica with the oldest suspicion in the world. She made it up. Judge Mitchell's face darkened. Mr. Reed, approach. When he returned, his eyes didn't show fear, but Jessica could tell he was calculating fast. Judge Mitchell addressed the room. These documents indicate the recording was altered on Ms. Park's laptop 4 days after the meeting. Jessica felt her blood go cold. She knew she hadn't edited it, but the court didn't run on what you knew, it ran on what you could prove. In the hallway, Marcus asked her the question that could end her life. Did you edit it? No. Did you open it? Yes. For what? To transcribe it, she whispered. I used speech-to-text software. It accessed the file. Marcus's eyes lit, not with joy, with relief. They're relying on technical ignorance, he said. Then he added, quieter, and they're betting the judge won't want to untangle it. When Marcus proved it in court, Catherine's confidence slipped for the first time. Judge Mitchell sanctioned her, but the defense wasn't finished, not even close, because Catherine hadn't only attacked the recording, she'd attacked the person holding it. That night, Jessica received an email from an unknown address. Subject line, "You were right, but you're not seeing it." No greeting, just one sentence. Check Appendix J in the FDA submission. The version the court has is missing pages. Jessica stared at the screen until her eyes ached. Missing pages? She forwarded it to Marcus. He called immediately. Do you have any copy of the FDA submission packet? Jessica hesitated. I downloaded a copy before they cut my access. Where is it? In my old encrypted drive. Bring it in, now. At 11:40 p.m. in Marcus's office, they compared files. The court's version of Appendix J had 4 pages. Jessica's version had 12. And in pages 5 through 12 was the thing Vertex never wanted in daylight. An internal chart showing mortality spikes, flagged in red with a note at the bottom. Not for FDA distribution, legal to advise. Jessica's stomach turned. Marcus whispered, they submitted an incomplete appendix to discovery. That's obstruction, Jessica said. Marcus nodded. But we have to prove intent, he replied. Then he looked at her, careful. Jessica, if we drop this tomorrow, they'll say you forged it. Her hands shook. "So what do we do?" Marcus leaned back. "We find someone inside who confirms it." Jessica swallowed. "There's no one." Marcus didn't blink. "There's always someone. People don't carry guilt forever. It leaks." The next morning, Marcus subpoenaed Dr. Raymond Lee again, this time for recall testimony. Dr. Lee entered looking like a man who hadn't slept in years. Catherine objected. Judge Mitchell allowed it. Marcus asked one question. "Dr. Lee, does Appendix J exist in longer form than what was produced in Discovery?" Dr. Lee stared at the floor. Jessica watched him fight with himself. Then, quietly, he said, "Yes." The courtroom went still. Marcus held up Jessica's copy. "Is this the full version?" Dr. Lee's jaw trembled. "Yes." Catherine stood sharply. "Objection! Foundation!" Judge Mitchell raised a hand. "Sit down, Ms. Voss." Dr. Lee's voice cracked. "They told us to remove pages. They said it would confuse regulators." "Who told you?" Marcus asked. Dr. Lee looked at Thomas Caldwell, then looked away, and said the name Jessica didn't expect. Daniel Torres. Jessica's mentor. Her kiddo. The man who said she'd go far. Jessica felt the betrayal like a physical thing. Marcus's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Daniel Torres instructed you to conceal mortality data from the FDA submission?" Dr. Lee whispered, "Yes." Catherine's face tightened. Thomas Caldwell didn't move, but his hands finally moved. They clenched. And for the first time, Jessica saw him not as a titan, but as a man realizing the walls were closing. Judge Mitchell's voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "stand." Thomas stood. Judge Mitchell's eyes were ice. "This is no longer simply a civil matter of retaliation." He looked at the clerk. "I want this testimony preserved and forwarded immediately." The jury deliberated. 3 days that felt like being held underwater. On day 3, they returned. Jessica stood, knees trembling, hands open now because she could no longer pretend control. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." "In the matter of wrongful termination," Jessica didn't breathe, "we find in favor of the plaintiff." The words didn't explode. They landed, softly, like snow covering something body's been trying to hide. Jessica's knees weakened. Marcus steadied her. "In the matter of whistleblower retaliation, in favor of the plaintiff, and punitive damages, we award Ms. Park $47 million. Reporters moved like a wave. Judge Mitchell struck the gavel, but his next words were the ones that truly changed everything. "Additionally," he said, "I am referring this matter to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation into Vertex Pharmaceuticals and executive leadership, including Thomas Caldwell and Daniel Torres." Jessica flinched at Daniel's name. Judge Mitchell's voice didn't soften. "This court has now heard evidence suggesting intentional concealment of fatal adverse data from federal regulators." He looked at Caldwell. "What you did wasn't just unethical, it was systematic." Then his eyes moved to Catherine. "And what your counsel attempted to do with technical misrepresentation and incomplete discovery approaches sanctionable territory." Catherine's face held, barely. Thomas Caldwell looked at Jessica, and in his eyes she saw something she didn't expect. Not anger, not fear. Recognition. The kind that says, "You didn't break.
and I didn't think that was possible."
3 months later, Vertex leadership began resigning in waves, not because they felt remorse, because they felt pressure. Zeltrex was pulled. Quietly at first, a temporary suspension, then a review, then silence. Families came forward, not just a class action, stories. A mother who watched her husband try Zeltrex and die within weeks, faster than the cancer ever moved. A daughter who thought she was buying time. Instead, she bought a lie. Federal indictments followed: fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, and then the headline that made Jessica sit down on the edge of her bed because her hands wouldn't stop shaking: Daniel Torres indicted. Her mentor, the man who taught her how to speak carefully, who taught her how to survive in corporate rooms, who ultimately taught her, by betraying her, that survival without integrity is just a longer death. Jessica didn't celebrate. She started the Whistleblower Defense Fund, not with speeches, with quiet action, legal fees, protection, counseling, the things she didn't have when the world turned. When asked why she kept going, Jessica said, "I didn't press record because I was brave. I pressed record because something in me refused to let death be written off as math." This was a story about corporate betrayal. Not just a CEO, but a system, a mentor, a compliance department designed to contain truth. Court documents tried to erase Jessica Park. Technical tricks tried to make her look like a liar. But truth is stubborn. It waits, and when it finally speaks, it names everyone who stayed seated. If you were in that room, would you have pressed record? Subscribe to One Verdict Away and tell me in the comments what you would have done. We'll see you in the next verdict.